Director's Reflections for July 23rd of 2023. Journalistic boils in the post-war. As a teenager raised in Ciudad Nueva, I witnessed the main events that had their epicenter there, from the execution of Trujillo back in 1961 until the Revolution of April of 1965. All the political boils that marked the return to democracy necessarily impregnated my early perceptions of the hardness and depth of the process towards the return of democracy. I vividly remember the violent persecution of the Calieses, or remnants of the dictatorship, whom they beat or flogged with chains. They also permeated my early perceptions of the boisterous demonstrations to expel Balaguer, the paper doll, from the country, as well as the continuous protest against the Council of State that seized control of power. In this climate of freedom, the first parties and movements opened the doors of their premises, turning Ciudad Nueva into the nerve center of the country's political life. The massacre on Espaillat Street, a corner from my house, projected with all its harshness the violent and traditional clash between the remnants of an oppressive class and the vibrant exponents of the libertarian class. Since I was never oblivious to these democratic labor pains, I had the audacity to get involved in the student marches against the triumvirate that ruled after the coup against Bosch back in 1963. I was also witness to the bloody skirmishes in the Independence Park after the deployment of tanks in the assault of the headquarters of the Unión Cívica Nacional, one of the main opposition groups, and the burning of the Olympia Cinema on Palo Hincado Street. The Dominican flag that we had at home was used to cover the corpse of one of the victims, the Taylor Verona, who was much loved in the neighborhood. Later, in 1965, the Constitutionalist Revolution broke out to restore Bosch to power. The first ambush against the fearsome white helmets of the repressive police occurred in front of my house. After the armistice supervised by the Inter-American Peace Force that invaded the country, a group of young poets, journalists, and lovers of literature emerged from this convulsive process, who little by little were integrated into the media. In my case, and in that of other young colleagues who joined print or radio newspapers in the late 60s and early 70s, political turmoil was also the dynamo of our reporting. For this reason, with some frequency, I transcended the limits of the neutral exercise of journalism, and sheltered from my professional status, I participated in the transfer and hiding of leaders of the Dominican Popular Movement, persecuted by the government of President Joaquín Balaguer, along with my colleague from Listín Diario, Marino Mendoza. It took a few years to mature and understand the dialectic of the journalistic function and that of the government and politics, and to be able to avoid the minefields in which those suspect of being opposition journalists or allies of the revolutionaries had to move. I now rejoice when others label me ultra-right or ultra-conservative, labels that might have been pared down if in those troubled times I had fallen a journalism martyr. For Listín Diario, voiceover and translations by Indira Rodriguez.